Go around, go around. Prophesied by Guru Guru in his windmill, every 3D Zelda game since Ocarina of Time seems to go through the Zelda Cycle. Welcome to Zelda Pod Smashers. People talk a lot about the Zelda Cycle. It's a term thought up by the fans, and recently even Eiji Aonuma talked about it. Basically, it describes how the general opinion of the Zelda community changes about a game throughout time. First they love it, then they hate it, or then they love it again, or the other way around. And people say it's the same pattern every time.
It generally starts with hating it.
Yeah, unless there's some hype in front of it. I am Stefan, and I'm here with Frank and Max. Hey there.
Hello.
Good morning, or evening for you.
Yeah, good morning. So, first of all, are you a believer?
Yeah, well, there does seem to be, some trends over the entire community. Although, I think on like an individual scale, I'm probably going to say no.
Okay. Frank?
I think it depends really on the games, and problem lies more in the games which they didn't deliver ever since Ocarina of Time, because it didn't have any Zelda Cycle back in the 90s with games like A Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time. People loved it when it came out. People still love these games. And yeah, with all the games following, they just didn't deliver. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, so do you think we can talk about a Zelda Cycle? I mean, is something there, or is it just nonsense?
There's definitely something there, or otherwise people wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
Because
that's
it's
what I
usually
think.
a big thing in forums, Zelda Cycle.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I was a bit surprised, actually, that there are many different versions of the Zelda Cycle, different descriptions.
Yeah, nobody really knows what it is.
No.
Yeah.
But we all talk about it, the Zelda Cycle.
Yeah,
we don't know what it is, but
I always thought it was just that a game gets overhyped before release, and then when it's out, people are disappointed by it, and then years later, the game redeems itself. That's what I thought, but
yeah,
Frank,
the hype part doesn't apply to all of the games. Like the Wind Waker didn't have any hype, quite the opposite. Lots of people were skeptical about it when we first saw it. I stopped playing Zelda for years when it came out. So, but it definitely didn't disappoint in some way. But then like Twilight Princess came out and did disappoint in its own way, and when people looked back to the Wind Waker and saw, okay, many things the Wind Waker did better than Twilight Princess. Like, it had more exploration, which Twilight Princess lacked.
Because maybe that's part of the Zelda Cycle. There has to be a new game before the previous game can be appreciated.
Well, I think, the later games of the series, they help to put the older games into context. And games like Majora's Mask and The Wind Waker, they sort of found their identity within the series with the release of Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, I think. So, fans began to sort of look back and see the unique qualities of those games. And I think that's contributed to this whole sort of cycle of, fans looking back and the game redeeming itself, I suppose.
Yeah. So, would Majora's Mask be the first game to be influenced by this Zelda Cycle?
Possibly.
In hindsight? I mean, back then they weren't talking about it, of course, but...
Well, yeah, I guess you could say Ocarina of Time started the whole cycle, I suppose, because, that game was so magnificent and so well received. Majora's Mask had no hope of, living up to the same expectations. So, obviously, it's a very different game. And when people initially saw it, perhaps they thought, maybe this isn't quite as good. But as later games have suffered the same fate of not quite reaching Ocarina of Time standards, I think fans have looked back and seen Majora's Mask in its own light. And, they've come to appreciate it more.
Because, Frank, you were saying that, first of all, back then, we didn't really have the internet. When was Majora's Mask released? 1999, right?
2000.
2000, wow.
There was internet, but not
Not
many
as
people
popular.
were using it as we
Yeah.
are using today. I only
Because-
had like 56k modem.
I can't remember looking up anything from Majora's Mask online. I remember with the Wind Waker though, but with your friends, you talked about your Majora's Mask with your friends, right? And they
Yeah.
didn't like it?
We are skeptical about the time limit things, and others just didn't like the content, I guess. But I really liked the game when it came out. I enjoyed it for what it was at the time.
Yeah.
I thought it had some flaws, but nothing major to like make me hate the game.
No.
So
Because I found a poll on Zelda Universe from 2006, right around the time Twilight Princess was released. And back then, Majora's Mask was half as popular as Ocarina of Time. And if you look at it right now, it's more popular than Ocarina of Time.
yeah, Majora's Mask have become a big fan favorite.
Yeah. But so I guess maybe that was the first game in the series that...
Yeah, you could say definitely, because
Yeah.
Ocarina of Time never had this skepticism or
Yeah.
revolving it, and always has been received as a good Zelda game.
I think in 20 years people will still compare the next 3D Zelda to Ocarina of Time.
Well, hopefully Zelda Wii U will break the cycle, but probably not.
Would be cool. And then the Wind Waker. What did you think of the Wind Waker back then? The style.
I didn't play the Wind Waker back in the time,
Ah,
but you know, if you look back at all the old news and stuff like that, you see a lot of complaints, mainly about the art style.
yeah.
Whereas, you know, then I think a lot of people just played the game. And then as the release of Twilight Princess grew nearer and nearer, people began to look back and see that it had its own charm. Perhaps opinions didn't change about the game so much, but just certain minorities stopped speaking up about the art style, and you heard a lot more conversation about how the actual game was.
Maybe people learn to look past the style and
Yeah,
just
that
appreciate it for what it was.
Mm.
Because then Twilight Princess, wow, I mean, it was so overhyped. It was going to be the next big thing. Like, it looked just like Ocarina of Time, but then prettier.
This is where the hype train started. I remember the time like this game was so overhyped and everyone expected the next Ocarina of Time. Because after Majora's Mask was aimed to be as a very different Zelda game, so I think no one had the expectation to be Majora's Mask something bigger. It's more like a side game. Then the Wind Waker with its art style, turned people off basically, and now with this game is like, oh, this is going to be the next Ocarina of Time. This is going to be so epic and big. But
Basically, what people wanted from the game, I mean, to be like Ocarina of Time, that's what it got criticized for most.
It was the game people had been waiting for ever since Ocarina of Time. And naturally fans were disappointed that they didn't quite get what they were after.
No. And then Skyward Sword tried again something new, like different graphical style, but also they changed up the formula a little bit. They added crazy stuff like robots in the past instead of the future. Do you think that game will redeem itself? Or is it already doing that?
From what I've seen, it's just gaining more and more dislike and hate.
Really? Oh.
Because I remember the reviews at the time were, like, people were comparing it to Ocarina of Time, saying it had finally met its match, you know, that it was such a fantastic game, and now all I see is just, oh, this game's awful. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, but maybe if we start to praise it as soon as the Zelda U game comes out, and it gets even worse, and then people start to like the things that Skyward Sword did right, as opposed to what the next Zelda game did wrong.
Yeah.
For me, Skyward Sword had the same problems as Twilight Princess.
Yeah.
Both still have a charm as you look back and say, like, okay, this is good, that is done well. For example, I liked Skyloft a lot as plays in Skyward Sword. As an example, but...
Yeah, I see it go both ways. I see a lot more people openly admit that they actually like the game. Well, a year ago, I didn't see it that much. But yeah, like Max says, also a lot of people who keep on complaining about how she never shuts up, things like that.
That's a valid complaint.
True, I'll admit that. Another thing I saw, like one description of the Zelda Cycle was that it's basically Nintendo trying something new, and then the fans getting so upset, and then they say they want classic Zelda, then they go back to classic style, and then they complain, we want something new, and then it goes back and forth. Do you think there's any merit in that?
But basically, if you look at the Wind Waker, it's more obscure with its art style. When we went back to the more classic looks with Twilight Princess, or a more realistic look, not classic looks. Then we have, again, a more art style game with Skyward Sword, but you could say that.
Yeah.
But I think what the fans want is the qualities of the classics, of the games we liked, but also get new things. So we don't want a complete rehash like Twilight Princess, which completely rehashed Ocarina of Time in many ways. No. You got it
should be a good mix.
The same areas and everything, and it's just, but it didn't have the same vibe to it.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think it's just the games. It's more the quality of the games that's the issue, and fans are just looking for other explanations as to why the quality's not as good. They're saying, "Oh, it needs to be new," or "Oh, it needs to be classic style." But the fact is, it just needs to be as good as what they're after.
Good. It's interesting, by the way, that only the 3D console games get this treatment, at least from what I've seen.
I think that might have something to do with the fact that, I guess, there's no Ocarina of Time in the
Yeah, they don't compare it so much to that. Although, yeah, I wonder about A Link Between Worlds, if that could follow this trend, maybe?
Possibly.
I wanted to say that Link's Awakening for me personally was always the Ocarina of Time of a handheld Zelda series. It has set the standards for me, basically, because it's also my first Zelda game.
Yeah.
And yeah, but with the handheld Zelda, they were very different. And so I don't think that the Zelda Cycle applies here. The best example would be the Nintendo DS Zelda games, which were despised when they came out, and they are still despised.
But is that because they compare it to A Link to the Past or Link's Awakening? Just because they were too different? I think you could
compare them to any Zelda game, and you would still do that. I think lots of people have problems with the controls.
But in general, why don't people compare the 2D games to the older ones? I mean, why don't we get complaints about the Minish Cap?
Because it's generally quite a good game.
Yeah, but then...
Given not as many fans have played some of these games, that might be a factor as well.
Yeah, maybe they just don't care that much about 2D games?
Yeah, that could be a reason.
Maybe that's it. They just don't get so upset about it. They just accept that the handhelds try something new now and then. And for the 3D games, they want something epic.
Yeah, or I think you always have this perspective that handheld games are smaller, and you don't really expect to be the next big uber quality game. That you would get what you expect from a next big 3D Zelda game. I don't think. It's handheld games are more like the small side games, so you don't really care if they are not that good.
Yeah. So, but for the console Zeldas, there's definitely something here, I think. Although maybe Zelda Cycle, it's not always a cycle. I mean, it's not the same way exactly. By the way, Eiji Aonuma, he said, he put it quite simply. He said that, Frank, you had the quote there, right?
Oh, I closed it. One moment.
Negative.
Basically, as time progresses, negative opinions about The Legend of Zelda turn into positive ones. At first I wasn't sure about that, but seeing the response to the Wind Waker HD, I think it might be right. That's what Ayunuma said in the Iwata Asks interview.
Yeah. Source in the description below, I guess. So, basically, if you look at that, that does seem to apply to a lot of games, but why?
Does it apply to every game though? I would have thought, say, Twilight Princess, I don't know, I thought the response was pretty good when it first came out, whereas ever since I think it's been getting sort of worse and worse, to the point where now, you know, people look back and say it's one of the weaker 3D games anyway. So that theory certainly applies to the Wind Waker, I would say, but I'm not sure about some of the other games.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on the Twilight Princess thing. The first time I played it, I was blown away by it. I loved it so much. And now I replayed it a few months ago, at the same time as you guys, and I hated it. No, well, I didn't hate it. I was very disappointed by it. It wasn't quite like I remembered it. Could it maybe be that sometimes we exaggerate our memories? Like,
absolutely. I think like nostalgia, when you look back, not just in video games but in all aspects of life really, you see things as better than they actually were. You forget the...
Like when you look back to school.
Yeah, you forget the mundane things, the bad things. You remember it as being better than it actually was. I think that's definitely a factor in some of these things.
Yeah, in general, people prefer to have good memories and not bad memories. So, like, if you have look at your pictures from maybe 15 years ago, most of those pictures will be nice pictures. You threw away the bad ones. Yeah. So I guess the same goes for Zelda. You just remember the good parts and you forget about the bad parts.
Or the other way around. If you if you had a particularly bad experience and you wanted to sort of remember it as bad, you'll forget the things you enjoyed about the games until, I don't know, you play it again later before the other games are released, and then you realise, they're good. Who knows?
Yeah, I think in general there are two ways you can change your opinion on a Zelda game. A, you play the game again and you think, oh wow, I didn't remember this, or I see it in a different light. Or B, you don't have to play the game, but you just change your opinion or your memories, or something else happens that changes the general opinion.
Like a new game coming out, maybe.
Yeah, if the new game is even worse in your opinion than the previous one, then you'll say, oh yeah, the previous one wasn't that bad. Yep. That's pretty cool. Or, like what you said earlier, there's a vocal minority who keeps saying that the game is bad. Maybe all the Skyward Sword haters are just, a handful of people who are trolling on the internet. Sorry, Frank. And people who don't like the game, eventually they just stop talking about it. And people who do like the game, they keep on playing it and keep talking about it.
And their voice gets heard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the factors in this whole Zelda cycle. Which fans are getting heard, where you're getting your information from, that kind of thing. How you're perceiving this whole thing is very important, I think.
Actually, I've had sort of a Zelda cycle when I was playing the older 2D games. The NES Legend of Zelda. The first time I played it, that was maybe 10 years ago. I didn't like it that much. It was so hard and confusing. I didn't know where to go, and I gave up on it after a few dungeons. And then almost 2 years ago I decided to play it again, and suddenly I really enjoyed it. I knew what to expect. I think maybe that's also a big reason. If you know what the bad parts are, or if you know the things that you didn't like at first, you're prepared to play it again.
Yeah.
Then it's not a huge problem.
And that's where overhype comes in.
Definitely.
If fans are expecting something really good, the game is going to have to be really, really good in order to not get this whole treatment. Because when fans are disappointed, it doesn't matter how good the game is. And you're going to hear more of that than fans saying, "Oh, this is amazing." So
yeah, I know for the Wind Waker HD is a bit different, of course, because they actually changed the game. But because of these small improvements to the game, I really got to enjoy the good parts of the game. And finally, after playing the HD, I was thinking, "Wow, I like this game." I didn't think that the first time. Another good point I read. Max, what was your first Zelda game?
Ocarina of Time.
Frank?
Link's Awakening.
And those games are probably your favorites, right?
No, second favorite for mine.
Well, hard to say it. It shares the first place with some other games.
Yeah, they're probably pretty high up the list. For me, it was A Link to the Past, and that's still in my top 3. But I think your first Zelda game is always your reference point.
Yeah.
Your next game, you're gonna compare it to your first. And you have this shifting generation. Like my sisters, they also play Zelda, but their first game was The Wind Waker. So I think that's also an influence.
Yeah, which game you played first?
Yeah.
The first Zelda game is always a special one. Like I've seen one guy on Zelda Universe who says that Four Swords Adventures and Spirit Tracks are his favorite games because he started with those. So for me personally, I think that's the 2 games I dislike the most. Not saying that these are bad games, but bad Zelda games.
Yeah. I feel bad for him. His parents, I mean, what were they thinking buying him Four Swords Adventures as his first Zelda game? No, but that's really a good point, because it's an important factor. And maybe that's why Twilight Princess is getting a lot of love, because for a lot of people it was their first Zelda game. The Wii sold incredibly well, and so the user base was big. And
it's the best-selling Zelda game next to Ocarina of Time, so naturally, it's a first for many people.
Yeah.
And then I can understand it when they're excited when showed the Zelda U trailer, like as a demo, and it was in style of Twilight Princess. Yeah, which it probably won't be. We'll see about that in a few weeks.
Yeah, it's too early to get disappointed right now, just because of some small news. But we'll see about Zelda U.
Yeah, we're still in the hype and overhype phase.
No, not really. I haven't seen any hype yet, because there isn't anything to get hyped about. Really, it's like
true.
There is no face to the game. We only have some small hints. So we don't know. There's nothing to be hyped.
Not so much hype, but yeah, expectation, wishful thinking, that kind of thing. People are hoping for something huge this time around.
Of course they are. It's Zelda. They want something huge. They want something epic, because that's what Zelda has been in the past. So that's what you want and expect. We'll see if Zelda U is going to be another hype train, or if it's going to disappoint or from the start, like the Wind Waker did.
Yeah, but in the end, maybe that's it. People have high expectations. People who will complain a lot, but then 5 years later, they'll go back and think, actually, it's a good game.
But it's as you said, you are prepared for the bad stuff, and you can focus more on what the game did right and what it did good.
Yeah.
The more I think about it, the less I think that my opinions about the games have shifted over the years. I think I get more negatively and more critical about the games as I go into the future. Okay. Like generally when a new Zelda game comes out, I'm really excited about it. I laughed Phantom Hourglass when it came out. I was like, one is the only guy who said, hey, this game is great, it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite Zelda games. But then I think my opinion got more critical over the past. Like, I tend to focus more on the negative things than on the positive ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me it's kind of backwards.
If I play Ocarina of Time now, I'm slowly getting tired of it, you know? Even A Link to the Past. It's my favorite game, but I've played it 4 or 5 times now. And last time I was thinking, yeah, I know this part. Oh yeah, this is pretty good, but nothing great, you know? But that would be true for anything in life. Like the Star Wars movies, or your favorite book, or even food.
I see many Zelda fans who like to dislike Ocarina of Time just because we played it so much and we got sick of it. And we know it's a good game, we just can't see it anymore, and we say, okay, Majora's Mask is the best Zelda game. Or just because we don't want to have Ocarina of Time on the top because we overplayed it. I see this a lot with Zelda
or because
fans,
they think it gets overhyped. They want to compensate it.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I really think there's something there, something of a Zelda cycle, but not as profound as some people say it. It's not a simple thing, like you can predict that in 2 more years Skyward Sword will be very loved or whatever.
It all comes down to the quality of the games. If a new Zelda game would do everything right, I don't think anyone would complain about it, and everyone would act like about Ocarina of Time if they say it's overhyped.
No.
And that's it.
Yeah, like Frank said, it depends on the game. Unique games get this kind of treatment, and games that don't quite live up to expectations get this kind of treatment as well. If we see another game like Ocarina of Time that delivers everything the fans want, then we'll probably, we won't see this kind of cycle thing going on, I think.
But if it's just a vocal minority, by the way, should Nintendo really be listening to their fans? If they made Twilight Princess realistic because a small portion was really complaining about the Wind Waker, while the rest of the people were fine but they just didn't talk about it, do you think Nintendo should take this into account a lot?
Looking at the sales, we definitely should, because Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time are the 2 best-selling Zelda games, already said that. And obviously that's what people want. They want a realistic style. And Nintendo wants to sell their games, so if the Wind Waker only sells half of that, it's only natural that they should listen to the fans and do what people want. But only to an extent. You also want to get surprised with the game.
Exactly. But it has to be very frustrating for them if everybody's going to compare it to Ocarina of Time. I mean, a game that's almost 20 years old in a few years.
Yeah, maybe we should make a game that surpasses Ocarina of Time in every level, and then people are going to compare to this game and not Ocarina of Time.
I wonder if that's possible, because Ocarina of Time jumped from 2D to 3D, so it was stupid to compare Ocarina of Time to A Link to the Past. I mean, it was so different. It was like a totally new game. How do you make something totally new for Zelda? It's already 3D. They already tried everything.
It's not about the new, it's about the quality.
Yeah, maybe. I hope so. Let's just see what Zelda does on the Wii U.
Alright then.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting because E3 is so close and we're finally going to see what the game is going to be like. And it will also be interesting to see if Zelda U provides arguments for or against the Zelda cycle.
Yeah.
Once again, thanks for listening. This time we decided not to do a podcast on a game, but more on a Zelda topic. So tell us what you thought. Also tell us if you believe the Zelda cycle is real, or maybe you have arguments that we didn't talk about yet. We'll see you at the next podcast.
Okay.
See ya.